Hello and welcome. I'm Vicki Hodges, your Fully Told podcast host. This podcast brings together lived experience and expert insight to create open and honest conversations around endometriosis and infertility. Every story shared is to help others feel seen, challenge stigma, build empathy, and support advocacy. So whether you're listening for yourself or someone else, thank you for being here and welcome to Fully Told. Hi, I'm Vicki Hodges, and here's another episode of Fully Told. Today, I am really excited to have Meeta here. She's going to be talking about her lived experience with endometriosis, her struggles with fertility, going through IVF, and that challenge to get diagnosis that so many of us also struggle with. She runs her own business, and she's also a mentor for women in their careers and around their fertility journey. So she'll be sharing a little bit about that today. So I really want to welcome you here and say thank you for being part of this episode.
Thank you for having me, Vicki. I'm really excited to be on today.
It's my pleasure to have you. I'm sure that everything that you have learned along your journey can really help other people. So let's get started and ask, when you said while we were chatting just then, you saw my post go out about this podcast and you wanted to come on. Can you tell me what it is that resonated and made you want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like every woman that's suffered from endometriosis, to know that we have like-minded women going through the same challenges, it just makes you feel that you're not going crazy, that you're not experiencing something that's only unique to you. You feel strength, and that carries you through all the challenges that are impossible with endo. I mean, I actually got diagnosed, or at least started to get the symptoms, way before the age of the internet. So, for me, it was a really lonely and confusing journey. And so when I saw your opportunity for a podcast and what you do, I thought, I really want to get as involved as I can to help, our fellow endo
Yeah.
warriors going through what they're challenged with at the moment.
Yeah, and it's a lonely journey as it is. And although it wasn't diagnosed till I was in my 40s, I had endo from my teenage years that I was very aware of what was happening to me. But Google didn't even exist. So you couldn't go on social media, you couldn't Google your symptoms.
No.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out for me is that I now have 18-year-old twin girls. They have an older brother, but obviously nothing to do with him. The twins are having different challenges around their periods, and endometriosis has come up now. And that's
Yeah.
where I've started to look again at what's going on, how I can support them. And in 20 years, Vicki, nothing's really moved on. Not really. Not in the
Okay.
lived experience of women going through it. And that's what broke my heart. And it made me think, I should have done more sooner. So I think I'm trying to make up for that now.
Oh, and it is hard. It's that guilt. And I'm a mother of twin girls, and mine are 16 nearly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly the same thing, that some struggles with the periods, and went to the doctor. And it was like, oh my goodness, 30 years on, nothing has changed. We're still having those conversations of nothing can get done. This is completely normal. It's meant to be like this. When I was like, okay, I can advocate for myself and her now, and still even having a strong voice and advocating, the only thing they would give me is either put you on contraceptive pill or have methylphenic acid. End of story. Leave the doctor's surgery.
Yeah. And that for me is probably the biggest memory of that time, is going to the doctor. This is when I was in my teens. For me, it started in my teens as well. I remember being put on the pill at 16, which probably wasn't good for me mentally, physically, but not really having anyone to sort of talk about my experience holistically. Even now, you get your 10, it's probably worse. You get your 10 minutes and then want you out the door, and it's not on
Yeah.
them. They're under pressure as well. But that's why I'm so grateful for the internet. That's why I'm so grateful for women who are sharing their knowledge and advising and just saying, listen, you're not alone, because that in and of itself, I used to get magazines, paper magazines, and look in the health pages. And, there was someone saying, get checked for endometriosis. And I remember showing my mum and her saying, well, look, NHS hasn't done anything. Shall we go private? And I used to feel guilty that we didn't really have the money to go private. And so I sort of said, no, don't worry, Mum, I'll work it out. So I went on the pill,
Yeah.
and I I went on the pill for about 6 years. I got married really young, actually. And so as soon as I got married, I thought, well, I'm just going to come off the pill now because it wasn't really suiting me. And as much as
Yeah.
I didn't want to have a baby straight away, I knew like the balance of coming off chemical intervention versus, being careful. I preferred to be careful. But, I think that's where, my symptoms started to get a lot worse. But we'll talk about that anyway.
Yeah. So if you feel comfortable, yeah, I would love to know, like, those symptoms. How did they show up for you? Was it all physical? Was it some mental? Like, what was happening for you?
Yeah. Initially, when I was in my sort of 14 to 16, 14 to 18 years, it was just that really difficult time during my period. They were extremely heavy, really severe cramping. Couldn't get through a day at school sometimes, but had this mindset of I have to. So, I'd
Mm,
take the tablets. I would probably get, signed off for some of my PE, but I was never really great at sport. I had a belly even when I was 14 to 16. I wasn't overweight, but I had a belly and I just put it down to genetics or eating Indian food, all of the things that you just don't
yeah.
question, just take for granted. And then I just got used to being somebody that had bad periods. And it
Mm,
wasn't till sort of 27, 28 when we started to think about trying for a baby that we went on holiday. It was around the time of Twin Towers. I mean, that's how long ago it was, but we'd gone to Sardinia because our holiday to America had got cancelled. And it was 9/11, and we were in Sardinia and we went to a restaurant, and it was actually a famous footballer at the time, Gianfranco Zola's restaurant. And I was all excited. And, Vicky,
yeah.
I had so much pain, I passed out. And I had
Wow.
never passed out so badly. I had had the really bad diarrhea, really bad constipation, pain for a few days before, pain a few days, like again, I just put it all down to, well, that's my lot. And I
Yeah.
remember going to the doctor and saying, like, I'm just in so much pain. And the doctor would say, lose a bit of weight, take some paracetamol, and, we'll see you again. And I went 6 times in about 8 to 12 months. Every time it was the same thing. They
Mm,
wouldn't refer me. They said it was normal. They said maybe lose a bit of weight because when you have endo, your hormones are all over the show anyway. So
mm,
you carry extra weight and you can feel bloated. And I had so much fatigue. I just
mm,
put it down to life.
yeah.
I was
And you just,
so fatigued. I'm
yeah, and you
fitter now than I was
exercise.
30 years ago. You can't exercise in the way you want to because your body just doesn't have the get up and go to do it, and when you're not diagnosed, you again just accept it and do your best. And the worst of it, Vicky, was again in my mid to late 20s. Every month I would be in pain for 3 weeks of the month. I was on maximum Nurofen, maximum paracetamol. I had pain going from my sort of abdomen right through to my knees and my ankles. I couldn't even stand up straight. And I was trying to
Mm,
get through a work day and I was trying to hold down my career and doing it all and just surviving. Now I look back, I realize that I was just surviving, barely,
yeah.
you know?
And that's, we do have to carry on life, and endometriosis, it takes over. It can take over people's lives, like your physical, mental well-being. Also, like you say, relationships, fertility, your work. Like, some people have to stand for their jobs and walk
Yeah.
around. And if
Don't know how they
I
do
have the
it.
same, still do have the same issue, like pain literally from your pelvis all the way down to your toes. Like, so you can't stand. It's that bad.
Yeah, it's debilitating.
It is, it's debilitating, and I'm thankful now they're kind of classing it as like a whole body
Yeah.
inflammatory chronic condition, because traditionally it's been known as a period problem. And
Yeah.
yes,
Or a
period,
female fertility. Yeah.
yeah, and you know what? Like, a lot of the time, like you said, you went so many times. Was it how many times in 1 year?
Six
And
times, 6 to 8
yeah,
times. Yeah.
still were told, "Go away." Like, when you went with fertility, did you go with fertility issues or
Well, what turned out was that because I'd come off the pill, it's sort of in my mid 20s and towards my late 20s, I wanted to start trying, and we weren't getting pregnant. Then, well, actually, what happened was I was at work, and my boss had come back from Sardinia. I'd had this really bad episode where literally the pain was so severe. I had such bad diarrhea. I literally thought I was going to die. Like for me, that was just such a bad experience. And I went back home and my boss actually called me in and said, it was a lady, she's a few years older. She said, I've just looked at your record and, you've been off every month for a day or two with flu. Because I never said it was my periods. I never said I had severe pain. Just put it down. And I don't think you realize how much time you're clocking up because because you're just so engrossed in just trying to get through another month. A day doesn't really feel that much, only one day in bed. Wow, that's bloody
Yeah.
lucky, actually,
Yeah.
considering the pain you go through on all those other days. So when she said that, and I thought, well, yeah, that's not the best record. That's a lot of days off in a year. Like if you're looking at yourself as an employee, and I didn't want to lose my job. And so I opened up and I said, actually, it's nothing to do with the flu. I mean, really, and I hadn't been diagnosed yet with endo.
Mhm.
I just said, I'm having such bad pains that I may have a day or two off, but I'm on maximum paracetamol and Nurofen for 3 weeks of every
Mm.
month. And I was bleeding for that time. And she referred me, because I had private medical through work, she referred
Mm.
me to a fertility clinic because I'd explained that we were trying to get pregnant. And it was through that. And even then, Vicky, they just did a scan and said, oh, you've got 2 tiny fibroids. Let's get you on. It's God, I can't remember the name of it now. It's a tablet you take to
Mm.
increase the amount of eggs you
Yeah.
create every month. Clomid, it's called. And started taking the Clomid and started seeing the gynecologist privately. And in the end, about, I don't know, 8-10 months later, I wasn't pregnant. Pain was there. Doctor didn't want to do any invasive because he said, look, we don't want to cut you open if you're going to have children. We decided that these fibroids had grown massively. And he said,
Yeah.
okay, this is a bit worrying now. Let's have a look. So I was signed up to do a surgery in October, which was
Mhm.
going to be, it was at the Portland. They're really lovely there. It was supposed to be like a cesarean type of cut. And they
Yeah.
were going to go in and remove the fibroids. But when I came out, they said, Meeta, we couldn't do anything. And I was like, what? Like, like just the fear of surgery. And I'd been through hell for months gearing
Yeah.
up for this, miraculous surgery that was going to fix all my problems, to come out and then say, yeah, you've got a scar this big, but we couldn't do anything. They said you had a frozen abdomen. They said you have severe endometriosis, stage 4, 28.
Mhm.
And it was almost a relief in a way, like as much as I was frustrated, kind of made, and they said, we couldn't find your anatomy. We couldn't find your ovaries, your uterus. Your whole abdomen was just
Yeah.
one big ball of
Solid.
scar tissue.
Yeah.
And so we cut a little bit where we could see that it was, stuck, but we didn't do a bowel prep on you. So we couldn't do any more. So we've had to sew you up and let's get you healed. And then we'll think about next steps. And that was a really dark time for me. That for me was rock bottom, because what I thought was rock bottom. And I
Mhm.
just sort of said, what about kids? Like, what about this? And it was all like, we don't know.
It's come because you finally thought you got answers, and then there's more questions come.
Yeah. And it was from that it took 6 weeks to recover from that. And
Mhm.
I ended up being referred to a specialist gynecologist who dealt with severe fibroids with the endometriosis. In January, we went to see him, and they did a sort of scan of my abdomen from front to back. And essentially this much of it was just scar tissue with the fibroids. I mean, when you looked at it, there was
Yeah.
it's horrible. You're trying to get pregnant. You can't get pregnant. And yet they describe the fibroid and the scarring in weeks. So
Gosh.
my equivalent was like 20 weeks.
Allowed.
Good. It was a head fuck. It was really hard. And it was, I was very low through it all. And in the end, in April, they did a surgery from my sort of just under my breastbone right down to my groin and cut me open that way. It was a 6-7 hour surgery. And you know
Whoa.
what? Yeah, they had warned me that I might need a colostomy bag back in January, but actually before the surgery, they didn't even mark one up. I don't know why. And this was
Mm.
private, they were all very lovely. And I had a specialist gynecologist in the room and a gastro specialist.
Mm.
And when I came out, they looked exhausted. I was in ICU. And they said, unfortunately, we've had to give you a temporary colostomy.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we've saved your uterus and we've saved your ovaries, so you can have your own children. But I won't lie to you, Vicky, at that time, all I could think about was, what? Like, a colostomy. They said, we've excised all of your endometriotic scar tissue. It's taken
Mm.
us 6-7 hours, but we wanted to give you the best chance of having a family. But I think the shock of the colostomy, even though they said it was only temporary at the time, it really, I was again getting darker and darker, at that time.
And that's understandable because, again, like these things are slightly alluded to, but it never feels like it might be a reality. And when I had my stage 4 endometriosis surgery, they did say, it could be a risk of a temporary for 3 months because it was on my bowel. Or worst case scenario, if anything's really bad, long, like you'd have it forever.
Yeah.
So I had time to kind of get my head around it, but not long. These are massive life-changing things. But to wake up from surgery and then present you, well, it's all really good because we've done this and we've got rid of a lot of the scarring and the lesions, adhesions, and you've kept your ovaries and your uterus. However, you've got this colostomy bag for 3 months. And I think with anything that we go through with surgery endo, it's always like you have to pick, like there's two kind of bad things, which is the least bad to cope with. And
Yeah.
it's not like they're offering you like this is fantastic and this is slightly bad. They're both major things that you've had done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to get your head around.
It was. And what I loved about the doctor, looking back, obviously it was all great. At the time, I think I felt very violated. When you're not a parent, you can't relate to being a parent. You know that you know it in a title, but not what that feels like.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was thinking, you could have kept me intact and I could have adopted. It's not even regret. It's just deep grief.
Oh,
And as much as all the good, the grief of, the being cut open, the grief of being left with a colostomy. Because after the next day he came, he said it won't be a couple of weeks, it will probably be a month. And then when I went to my 6-week check, he said, actually, this is permanent. We think you should at least have your children before you even think about reversing it, because of where it was. They said there's a grave risk of you might perish if we did a reversal. So it was like, wow. And, by then, it took me about 6 to 8 weeks after that surgery to come out of that dark cloud of overwhelm, catching up with what I'd been through, that the endo had been excised, that I had a chance of having a family, and I had a colostomy bag that could be with me for life. That took me a good 6 to 8 weeks. And what was quite hard was that the only people I really showed my sadness to was my parents. I couldn't really open up to my partner. As much as he was there for me, I think he was in as much shock as me,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And the physical, just surviving, just recovering from a surgery, let alone then managing a colostomy bag it was a lot. And I think it took me 6 to 8 weeks for the sun to start to shine in my mindset and my life again. But when it did, boy, was I back and was I ready, and started seeing it as the win that it was. Actually, they put me into temporary menopause, which I know they still do as one of the treatment approaches, but we'd agreed that once I had healed that we would go down the IVF route. But they told me, they said, it's very unlikely that you'll have kids, but we've tied your tubes because they were inflamed and they were putting poison back into my uterus.
Yeah.
But I think for me, all I thought was I never want to bleed again, because if I bleed, I will get more endo and then it will come back. And that was my fear,
The fear.
So.
Fear is huge. Like there's so many huge emotions that you've just mentioned then, alongside the physical stuff you're going through. Like you've
Yeah.
had major surgery. On top of that, a colostomy bag. On top of that, talking about fertility, like the healing from the actual operation, and then dealing with it and not knowing who to talk to about all these emotions you've got coming up for you and not being able to vocalize that. But you said that you did see kind of the light and it kind of got better. So what changed for you?
What changed for me was having doctors that listen, for having nurses in the hospital that made you feel that you weren't alone and you weren't unique, that somebody else had got through this and achieved something. You think, well, you know what, I can do it too.
Yeah.
Again, why the power of social media and the groups and what you've created is so important, because, when you feel alone, Where do you pull the strength from? Yes, we have a lot of inner strength. You know, we are warriors. Every week, every month, we go through the pain. But where do we, where do you get that extra from? And, I
Yeah.
think for me, I was at a crossroads, Vicky. I was told you probably won't have children. I felt disfigured initially. After a while, I'm one of these very open people. I must have shown that colostomy bag to hundreds of poor people that may or may not have wanted to see, but I wasn't ashamed of it. I
No, you
said,
should.
I've been like replumbed. I'm like, I'm bionic, and it's because of this that I can have an opportunity and a chance to have a family. And I tell you what, all my bowel issues went because I can now decide when I wanted to go. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy. I had it for 7 years in the end, and I had to speak to many doctors. And in the end, there was a team who said, we're cowboys of the Wild West when it comes to reversals. My
Yeah.
doctor who created it wouldn't do it. He said, I'm not touching it. It's too dangerous. But these guys did it over 3 different surgeries and reversed me. And that
Okay.
was 16 years ago. So,
Oh, 7 years. And
yeah.
then, I mean, for people listening to this who may be going into surgery that, have that talk with their doctor, there could be a chance of colostomy bag, that is so reassuring for them to know that living with it, you dealt with it, but also,
Yeah.
and you could see the positives from that and the fact that that then enabled you to do so many other things, but then it was reversed. So there was a yeah.
Yeah, it's you know what I think it is. It's advocating for yourself and connecting with yourself and understanding what is important to you, and what that, they talk about self-love and self-care, but actually, yes, that's where it starts. And no one really teaches us that when we're young.
No.
We have to find out through trial and error, especially
Yeah.
this endometriosis journey, about how much when we go and sit with a doctor, how much we actually say, I am not happy accepting that. What are my options? We are actually allowed to have a second opinion within the NHS. Even
Yeah.
now, they've got something extra called right to choose,
Hmm.
and so we can knock on many doors. And when a doctor makes us feel this small, not intentionally, but that's the feeling, take a deep breath and say, I understand that's where you're coming from, but this is where I've got to come from. Only I can advocate for myself, and I'm going to do that. So I'm probably going to be a bit annoying, but I'm all right with that because I
Yeah.
need to do whatever I can to get my outcome. And I think that's what changed for me, was having people that didn't gaslight me,
Mm.
listened and actually said, you know what, if you want to go through this journey, we'll go on the journey with you and we'll be there to support you. Doesn't mean we'll get the outcomes you want, but
Yeah.
we will be on that journey with you. And the crossroads I mentioned, it was, well, do I really push myself down this journey of having a family? Or do I
Hmm.
accept that I can get rid of the endo and be a really happy girl with no troubles in the world anymore, hopefully? But I thought, and I was never very maternal. I always imagined having the kids at the end, big family, but I would
Mm.
never really wanted to hold everyone's baby. It's kind of like a weird, but when I was faced with it, Vicky, I thought, no, I want a family. And so
Yeah.
I went down the IVF route.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Like, when that's a big decision for anybody to make, like, what was that like? Did you have another battle to kind of get that support?
Well, back in, again, when I started it, we had no NHS option. My husband and I actually remortgaged the house to do it.
Mm.
And we talked a lot about the fact that, you can have all the holidays, all the big houses, all the nice jewelry. But if you feel empty of a life of having a family, what's the point of all of that? And that was my thinking. And actually what I wanted to, and even now I live with this mindset, I never want to look back and think, what if? If I've tried and it hasn't worked, I can be at peace with that. But had I not tried, I think it would be a life that felt unfulfilled. So for me, and thankfully Tony, my husband, we decided to throw money at it. And God, we've paid that off. Took us years to pay that off, and still paying off, really, if you think about it as a mortgage. But it's the best investment we made. The same doctor that did the surgery had an IVF side of his team, and we did 2 rounds of IVF. It didn't work. And they
Mm.
discovered that because of all of the inflammation, all of the problems, my body was, struggling.
Yeah.
It turned out that I suffered from almost like an early miscarriage experience. I had thick blood. The embryos weren't embedding. My body was rejecting. But you know
Right.
what? Perfect solution was aspirin, heparin. They put me on heparin. They put a frozen embryo in, which usually has less chance. And I was pregnant. And, that was actually the first time I'd ever been pregnant in my life. I was 29, 30. Unfortunately, because of the journey, I don't think it was till my son was 6 to 9 months old that I actually relaxed into feeling that this is my baby and everything's going to be all right with him. I was so used to things not working out that even though I had a positive mindset that I will get there, the fear was still there.
Yeah. And endo can have such an impact. I know I've done and I'm still doing my journey of like figuring things out and emotional health and that. I think we underestimate how much what we've been through, just even from people gaslighting us, that affects our mental health. And you're just so used to just getting on with the pain, getting on with the struggling, having the IVF, like appreciating what you've got, that we don't often just go, my God, actually, that was really shit. That was
Yeah.
hard. I deserve to give myself some love and
Yeah.
compassion. That was a really difficult time in my life, and I'm still experiencing the fallout from that. And like you say, it's like that 6 to 9 months after, it's still not allowing yourself to fully be in it because you're almost like something may else get taken from me or happen to me. And it's living with endo, fertility, anything like that is like expecting it to happen
The
still. Like,
worst. Yeah.
yeah,
Always expecting the worst. And it's interesting what you say about mental health because, Vicky, at the time when you're young and we're robust, aren't we? I think the younger you are and the less you've experienced hardship, the more resilience you've got for it. But over time, that resilience, it wears away. And again, I think that so much of what you do and why I want to do more is that actually we can replenish the pot of resilience to give us the strength to push forward and
yeah,
advocate and continue to get the answers and the solutions that we deserve. The first time I realized that I had been mentally affected is that out of nowhere, I developed a fear of flying and it was severe. Like I literally went from being somebody that didn't even think about getting on a plane, to having extreme reaction where I couldn't even book a ticket. It was a big no. And I was referred and I saw a specialist and she said that it was probably down to the journey I'd been on and being in an IVF situation where it wasn't working and realizing that I don't have control over this,
right,
and that took a long time. But that's when I realized the fragility of our mental health
yeah,
alongside our physical health. But having my son, then going and having the twins, I got lost in the gratefulness of it. And I started to, look at life half full again, started to realize that, hey, things can work out. And, the doctors spoke a lot about, these are miracle kids. Like we didn't think you'd have kids. And they'd always say to me, your attitude and your mindset and your belief is the majority of like we as doctors can do the mechanics, but you are the one that will take yourself forward. And again, that takes a village of
yeah,
people and support and self-belief and all of that. Um, so don't underestimate the importance of talking about it. And what I would say now, looking back, I wish I had a mentor or a coach for my pain from the beginning. I look back now and if I was going to say something to 14, 18, 24, 28-year-old Meeta, it was like, let someone hold your space and let someone hold your tears. I think I cried in private. I might have cried to my mum, but I never really realized what the battle had been. And actually, the only time I really allowed myself to feel the pain, it was after I'd had my colostomy reversed and it had taken a lot of surgeries. And it was about a year after that I hit rock bottom and
well,
probably the closest thing to a nervous breakdown. Couldn't make sense. Everything was great. I had my own business. It was doing well, had a family. Surely this is what it was all about. And yet inside I felt completely empty and devoid of joy. And again, went to see psychiatrist, CBT counselor, psychotherapist, took some medication for a while, took some antidepressants for a while.
yeah,
And thank God for these people that realized that I was now in a position where because I'd got through the pain and I was
yeah,
looking back at it, I'd got through the emergency of it all, that my body was literally shutting down because my mental load was just overwhelmed. And I'm 15 years on and still dealing with it. I'm definitely understanding of what that all means now. But yeah, it's a journey, and it's not just a physical one.
Yeah, it is a journey, and thank you for sharing that because, you went through a lot. And I think that quite often we just keep going and going and going, and our nervous system goes, "I've had enough now." Like, you cannot take any more. And sometimes it's when we are in a safe place and maybe a little, like you said, you had everything going for you, your business and everything was good. And then sometimes that little bit of safety allows us to then feel into it. And that's
Yeah.
when it shows up for us because it's safe enough to do something about it.
Yeah.
And thankfully, you had those people around you that were there to help support you and lift you back out.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done without those specialists and experts, because I didn't know what was going on. But when you look back and you think, wow, that was nearly 20 years of my body not doing what everybody else found just natural.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, when you look at people who don't have period problems, who don't have problems getting pregnant, who don't have physical challenges, who take everything for granted, and you're there feeling really lonely because, and also the why me, and I always used to say to myself, well, everyone has something, Meter, but it doesn't take away that feeling of
Yeah.
despondence and just the hardship of what we have to carry.
Yeah, and we do carry a lot as endo warriors. And, some people like the word warrior, but some people don't. It's like, but that fighting all the time and it gets exhausting. It
Yeah,
really does.
it does.
So you also do some mentoring, don't you? And like you've had that kind of guidance and mentoring and support. Like, is that maybe what led you to go down mentoring?
You know, I was always very ambitious. I think that no matter what I did in life, I wanted to do it well, and I wanted to be proud of myself and make my loved ones around me proud of me. And so when I started the business and ran that business for many years, I realized that, hold on a minute, like what I have inside me, and I guess the voices that said, yeah, go for it. Not everybody has that. And maybe with my endo challenges and my fertility challenges, my employer was a real partner on that journey. They really helped me, and I
Yeah.
thought, you know what, I want to do that for my employees and for the wider world, because there's no knowing what we hear or what we experience. That's either going to set us on a path towards it or to shy away from what we actually want. So part of my women in business and career progression journey has been to help women to, I say, have it all. I wanted to have it all. I actually think we do it all rather than have it all. So that's the rebalance now. But it's about knowing, how can I get the balance of what is right for me and
Mm.
advocate for myself, not just at the doctors, but with my employer? How can we help employers be better supporting women who are going through, whether it's fertility, period challenges? We know in Spain now, having time off for periods is the law. And I'm just like, wow, finally. Or, now I'm at that stage when it's going to be menopause and things like that. So women deserve a voice and they deserve support. And so for me, career and women's health, fertility, they go hand in hand. So I mentor and support women who are going through that life journey on how to navigate, how to communicate, and how to advocate and be their own ambassador.
That's fantastic. It is really good because, like, I think anybody that does it, but especially when it's come from that lived experience and firsthand knowledge of how it can affect you, you can do it even better because you really know what would make a difference in those women's lives.
Yeah.
Um, and then career, maybe it is about having it all or knowing that things are achievable if you want to have it all, or
Yeah.
you
It's
you
your
want.
balance of.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, well done for that. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
lots of people listening would want to know more about that. Is there any way that people can get in touch with?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm very prevalent on LinkedIn. That's where I do my professional work, but anyone that has a look can see that I make it real, I make it personal. We are not what we do. It's the people that we put ourselves into what we do. So that's on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. That is very much just my sort of personal page, but come along, join, reach out to me. I just love talking and supporting. Obviously there's a service, but this is just about connecting and helping women in any way I can. And one thing, Vicky, I haven't said is it affects us. I mentioned my parents, my partner. There's a
Yeah,
whole village around us that it affects too. And now we're both talking about our girls and how we can support them and our community here. it really is about connection. So anyone that wants to connect, I'd love to.
Oh, that's lovely. And I'm sure you will have a flood of people connecting, and getting your help. And it really does. It takes a village. I think women supporting women, but also getting an ally on board
Yeah,
as well. And not just those that have been through it. It's like everybody understanding. And that goes for anything that people are going through. Just having that level of empathy and support and just pulling together and connecting as communities. So if there was one key message that you would like people to take away from today, what would that be?
well, I think that pain is transient. As much as our pain is really deep and really intense, we can find ways to overcome it, whether it's surgery, whether it's medication. There's so many ways that we can get past it, and we have the strength to do that. And don't let it define you. Use it as a tool to help you keep pushing for the answers. Find in the language, whether you talk to somebody like me, talk to Vicki, look online, whether you're at school, whether you're at work, whether you're sitting in front of a doctor, make a list, go in prepared, explain what you need, and ask them if they can help you, because there's always an upside to getting you resolved, getting your challenges resolved. Don't feel that you can't explain to people what you need, but also the benefit of that to them and to people around you.
That's such a positive message and a light for many people when they could be listening to this in where you were, those deep despairing moments, and they can't see that light and that change is coming. So just for you to say it does come, but reach
It
out for
does.
that support
Yeah,
and other people will help you if you can't find the way yourself.
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have absolutely loved speaking to you. I could carry on for another hour,
Me too.
but unfortunately the time has come. So I will put your links with this podcast so people can
Thank
reach out and
you.
find you. But I just wanted to say a huge thank you again for sharing your story, your experiences, and all the positive things that you have given to
Amazing.
us today.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you for inviting me on and for everything you do. I just think it's amazing, and very grateful to have been able to share my story today.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Fully Told. If you've got any questions or you'd like to share your own story, I would love to hear from you. Get in touch at hello@pausefully.co.uk. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please help me keep making a difference by giving the podcast a follow, share, or leave a comment. If this episode has resonated with you, you will find a list of charities on my website where donations are very welcome. Find out more at pausefully.co.uk, and don't forget to explore the other episodes of Fully Told for more honest conversations and inspiring stories.